guys, how's it going? Oh, by the way, that's some horse. If you hear horse sounds, it's because I'm recording this at a stable. But if you guys are interested, there's an academy about to happen in Japan in November, which should be really, really interesting. So if anyone's interested in doing that, then you can either get in touch with me or you can contact Earthship directly on earthship.com. But for today's episode, this is special because it's with someone who has managed to create a school, an off-grid school, and teach almost a generation of students in the sense that it's been open for 15 years. So that's enough time for the oldest students to have spent their entire school career in one place, learning off-grid techniques and learning that they are part of the solution for the future and about to be fully active in the workplace and maybe even get into organizational roles within the community. Just really exciting. An example of scalability about to happen. Their school has grown with them, and you can find out more information about the school at longwayhome.org. Actually, the correct address is lwhome.org. So check that out. And in the meantime, enjoy this conversation. It was a real pleasure for me to get to speak to someone who's been there and done it. So I hope that the same is true for you. Take care. Hey, Matt, how's it going?
Good. How are you?
Yeah, I'm good. It's great to speak. I've actually realized doing research for this conversation that I've seen your work for ages now. It's cool to connect.
Yeah. What do you mean you've seen our work for ages?
I've seen YouTube videos. I've heard about a project in Guatemala that was building a school. I've heard, sort of without really remembering the name very well. I've just sort of seen what you guys have done.
Sometimes we get the feeling that very, very few people have ever heard of what we do.
Well, it's a small world, isn't it, I guess? Maybe you're very, very big fish in very small pond or something. I don't know how the saying goes.
Absolutely.
From afar, and what I've seen, as I said, from seeing your work for a while, you obviously do a lot of natural building, but the real focus seems to be on education. I mean, the short question is sort of what do you say? When people ask what do you do, what do you say? But it seems like education is the center of it, or am I wrong?
Well, when we started all of this, you've heard, we'd all heard that everything comes back to education. And for the lion's share of the time that we spent green building, our focus wasn't necessarily on education. I mean, people were coming, and they would come and volunteer and would learn quite a bit. But really our focus was just on learning how to do the buildings. And then I'd say pretty recently, that's changed because what we're starting to understand is if it's not rooted in an educational model, then, we can expect that it won't be around for very long, like the green building techniques. If people don't know how to do it or don't know some of the finer details, then it will become a novelty.
Right. So what was it? So you got grabbed by natural building as a first step into this world of what you do now, or was there something else that started it all?
Well, there was no one day in which I was like, okay, from now on, we're going to do everything this way. There really was no great plan at the beginning of this. Basically I was a Peace Corps volunteer. And after the Peace Corps in Guatemala, I moved back to the United States and was living in Oregon and working in a vineyard and a winery and, just kind of not entirely fulfilled by what was going on there. And so I decided to go back to Guatemala and we built a city park from 2005 to 2009. When I say we, volunteers showed up and, people came from all over the place and built the city park. The city park was pretty well at least the students coming to the space was the focus. during my Peace Corps time, but there really wasn't much infrastructure there. So we built a basketball court and a soccer field. And while we were doing all that, you just can't help to notice that everywhere around you, people are collecting firewood all day. Most kids are not going to school all the way through the 6th grade. People are carrying water, that water is contaminated, that there's trash on the ground, that it's being burned all over the place. And okay, well, recreation's great and everything, but there are obviously other priorities. And since me and one of the other people that really helped us start Long Way Home and had a background in construction growing up, we had both done construction rather than, waiting tables and whatnot in college and high school. We knew how to do green building, and especially this guy. And so we started building stoves, water tanks, and for people. And we're like, okay, this is helpful, but it's certainly not going to make a huge difference. We could do this our whole lives, and it wouldn't make that big of a difference to society on a whole. And that's where we came up with the idea of building the school, and that's where we came up with the idea of providing an education.
Right, because it seems to me like there's a real power in cross-cutting issues, from whether it's environment that mixes with gender stuff, which mixes with education, which mixes with whatever else. Once you start doing things together, there's a real exponential effect, isn't there? I mean, this school is going into senior school now, is that right? Like what's the situation now?
The situation right now is, although we built an entire campus and repurposed 15,000 tires. And really what's going on now is the most exciting thing, because we actually have a full-on, we have a purpose as a group. Now, we had a purpose before, but it was kind of all over the place. There were some people who thought that the environment was most important, and they weren't wrong. There were some people that thought indigenous rights were the most important, and they weren't wrong. But it was hard to, get everybody into under one flag to where we could really focus our efforts. And so whenever we got, to the point where the school was most of the way done, we started noticing that our students were receiving, this very basic state-mandated rote memorization education. And all of us were pretty well, we didn't just spend a decade living here, 12 years living here, to see our students receiving this education, which means that the entire system that created their situation would be perpetuated by our school. So we couldn't possibly live with that. And so we went out searching for okay, we have this big, beautiful school, and now what are we going to teach, and how are we going to teach it? Two very, very difficult questions to answer. And, back to what's going on now, we figured out an education model that we think will actually have a long-term unified effect, and that is all of us working. It's called democratic education. It's kind of a loose term at this point because, we don't know exactly what it means, other than we would like to make a significant contribution to our society and then potentially be taken seriously when it comes time to decide, future legislation, policy, and change. We wanted to come to the table with ideas. And really everybody on our team is rallying behind that. Everybody's very comfortable with that super positive yet aggressive.
What was the process in deciding what the education would do?
Well, we kind of had to start with what we understood as the circumstances. If they continued with this state-mandated rote memorization education, likely everything, like I said, would be the exact same. So, we understood there to be high unemployment. So 87% of people don't have jobs with full benefits, that 36% of the middle school population wasn't continuing their education, and that 1% of people were going on to college, that water was terrible, that people were cooking over indoor open flames. We started off with this is what we need to deal with, because although other nonprofits do a great job and the government is doing what they can, we could talk about that entirely separately. But, we wanted to take on the issues that are facing us. And so there was this philosopher named John Dewey, and really it was Dewey's philosophy, of course, combined with the philosophy of many other educators and people in history, but pretty well his gave us a path to how it would be possible to deal with those community-based problems, but while also providing an education that will prevent them from continuing. And so you've probably seen this everywhere, but I don't know, I see this a lot in Guatemala and certainly a lot in the U.S. that particularly the people representing us at the top don't always have our best interests in mind. And so what we do is we complain about it a lot. We speak sternly in front of other people, but there's not a lot of movement from what I've seen in education to actually educate the electorate to be involved in the political process from day one. And so we would like to be involved in the political process day one without choosing a political party. It's like we want to make that contribution, and that's gone a long way.
Wow. I mean, yeah, I can see sort of millions of rabbit holes just sort of opening up before me, but I'm going to try and focus in on what do you want, or what do we want as a whole, children or young people, to be focused on. And it sounds like you've gone for the practical in terms of how to be able to live better or create the situation where people can live better, and then how to sort of stop listening to the way things have always been and pioneer and at least start to really explore what a better way forwards would be. And that, to me, is what is exciting about Offgrid in general, is it's like saying, well, maybe now's a time for less leadership that takes us in the same old directions, and for us all to take responsibility, essentially, for what we do.
Absolutely. And there's a lot of suggestion, in educational philosophy that if people really enjoy what they're doing, that they'll do far better at that. And, what we found that was great, the connection, which we saw between green building and democracy building, was that when you're green building, you stand in front of a space and you go, okay, what is best here for a home or for a classroom or for a cistern? And then you have to take everything into consideration, the climate, everything around you. And then you have to then find out what, other people around you are thinking as well. And so we've seen that within green building, we as green builders thrive when more people bring really good ideas to the table.
Yeah.
Seems like it's very much the same thing in a democratic process. When people are bringing great ideas to the table, I feel like there's a potential to thrive in that.
Well, see, I have lots of questions later. I planned on questions about the community and how it's affected by what you do. But maybe I'm going to sort of hold off on that for a second.
All right.
I mean, what did you study at college? What was your sort of initial point of departure? Why are you doing this and no one else is the main question.
Well, I was I did an Associates of Applied Science, which is a 2-year degree, and I was a paramedic and a 911 paramedic. And so a lot of that training, I don't know, it's been there ever since. That has made a difference all the way through. Just that I understood the steps by which situations unfold and have the structure to sort of deal with those things. Going to paramedic school gave me that for sure. And then after that, it was a BA in sustainability from Goddard College in Vermont. And they provided us with something I'd never even considered before. And that was an education that basically you get to school and they're like, so what do you want to learn? What's interesting to you? And they kind of work you through what's interesting. And then they, of course, it's accredited, of course, but bringing into the fold some of their ideas, some of the ideas of the people around you, and just introduce this entire new approach to education that I really had never been exposed to. And I really enjoyed it. I enjoyed the structure, the people. They did a great job. And then I did a master's in education after that. And that's where I was introduced to the likes of John Dewey and William James, and basically the philosophy of education, quite a bit of it during and just past the Enlightenment.
Oh, cool. It's funny, isn't it, how the picture of one's life or one's biography sort of is a little bit like a pixelated picture that starts really blurred and slowly it's still the same thing, but with more and more definition somehow. It sounds like all the pieces maybe come together into a unique blend.
Well, I mean, I would definitely be a fine example of, you know how people would be like, hey, man, don't change a thing, be yourself. Well, we can be thrilled that I was not, because I was raised in a pretty difficult part of East Texas. And I'm not saying that East Texas, there's anything wrong with East Texas, but, you know, it's a very conservative space. And it's got some traditions that we're all not very proud of. And, you know, some of that free thinking, some of the exposure to some of the, you know, the previous free thinkers really gave me access to that. And
so skipping forwards, you're in Guatemala, you did the park, and then you realize there are more pressing needs. From afar, it seems like you've partnered and worked with lots of different people and been able to bring people together. I mean, I got your contacts from Guy. I know you did some work in South Africa. Sure. It looks like you did the project with Earthship Biotecture. Mm-hmm. So what was the forming of your group of people and your partnerships? Like, what's happened there?
It's been really great. You know, whenever you decide you're going to build a park in Guatemala with all the locals, you really get some wonderful people. You know, I was there with a couple of volunteers, and then somebody caught wind of what we were doing while they were in Antigua and was like, yeah, I want to come out and see what those guys were doing. And then 3 years later, you're really good friends and you've been working together for a long time. And wow. That really just happened like over and over and over again. We've had 35-ish full-time staff working for us. And yeah, people, you know, it's kind of like being able to put your foot kind of on the front line of something you've always wondered about. Like, what's it like to do development work in a small village in Guatemala is not really something it's easy to find out much about.
To get a bit more specific about the building, because I saw some phenomenal projects. You've got a 42,500 gallon cistern for water.
Sure.
That's, for other people listening, that's 160,000 liters. That's 160 of those massive, well, not massive, but those sort of like, you know, if you imagine putting your arms around a big tank, that's about the size of a normal person. That's 1,000 liters. So it's 160 of those.
Right.
That's just amazing. Like that must have been super exciting to me. Like, what was the story of that one thing, for instance?
That one thing was, well, you know, our campus is supposed to be this monument to sustainability, really. Like, you know, there are examples on our campus of a dry compost latrine with 4 stalls, a dry compost latrine with 2 stalls. There's smaller water tanks. There's a 5,000 gallon water tank. There's, you know, we're trying to demonstrate and potentially investigate like the difference between conventional construction and alternatives. Like, can we make this cheaper is what we were thinking going into that gigantic cistern. Can we do this? Is the cost prohibitive of building a tank out of concrete, making it, or is it prohibitive for people to build water tanks? And so it was like, well, let's do this one. And so this one, we found out once we get to the point to where we can publish it beyond just making the video, we found out, yes, it is cheaper. And it went really well. We dug 32 courses of tires into the ground, or like there's 20 courses, 25 courses into the ground, and 10 sticking up above ground. And then we built that domed library on top of it. And so all of the water from that cistern is collected on the roofs of the other buildings.
Right. Who designed it? Like, you had the idea, you said, let's make it this big. And then what was it? What was the whole design process? Because it gets risky at that kind of size, doesn't it? I mean, it's big.
Well, it was so risky that the first time we did it in that hole, we didn't put drainage all the way around the north side tires touching the dirt. And that water got saturated behind those tires, and half of the cistern caved in. So that meant we had 3,000 tires of dirt packed in tires that we had to dig out, remove all the tires, remove all the dirt. And but ultimately the design, and we ended up putting it all back together.
But it's such a hard thing to admit, isn't it? When you're like, we're going to have to dig it out. That moment of like, damn.
It was heartbreaking, really. But that's really where we learned the most. I mean, is really, it's been through failure, more failure. You don't invite failure, but each time something like that would happen, you would learn a whole bunch. And we learned a lot about drainage at that point. The really hard way. But the guy that designed it, his name is Adam Howland, and he and I were in Peace Corps together, and he ultimately started with how many students he thought would be attending the campus, 300 to 350, and was like, okay, how many times will they be flushing the toilet? How many times will they be washing their hands? How many dishes will get washed? Well, then what we're going to need is, 42,500 gallons at least. We could easily build another one. And we also wanted to be able to, after capturing water on the roofs, to be able to, we're kind of on a hill, and there's a village just below us, and that would be to provide them with potable water as well. So.
Yeah. Wow, no, it just looks beautiful. It looks really beautiful. I'd love to see it. So yeah, moving on to the other things, you got a double-story dome. It seems like the whole thing is expanding now. So how many classrooms is it? How many buildings are on the campus?
Well, as far as classrooms go, there's 14 different classrooms. In addition to that, there's a library, and then there is the administration office, and then there's a laboratory for the science students, and then there's a teacher's lounge, and there's a cafeteria space. We have terraced gardens, of course, and there's a compost latrine, 2 pretty big water tanks, volunteer housing. It's a full-on, complete and total developed piece of property turned in. We like to say that we turned 400 tons of trash into an operating primary, middle, and high school.
Yeah, no, brilliant. Did the whole trash thing, was that inspired by Mike Reynolds and his work, or what was the sort of...
It was for us, as far as an option goes. Like, we were looking for different ways to do things. When it came time to build a campus or build cisterns or anything for anybody, we were looking for different ways. And one of our Peace Corps friends, had given Adam this book like 5 years before that, which is Earthship Volume 1.
Yeah.
And Adam held on to this book, didn't mention it much to anybody. And then in 2008 was like, hey, I've got this book. What do you think about this? And then Adam, being the guy that he is, put the book on the ground and just started following the instructions. And that was really our starting point. And then, of course, you can't follow the instructions step by step from the book, but our previous knowledge as builders combined with that book is what made the next decade of trash construction possible.
Oh, that's cool. So then you partnered with them in 2011, was that? You did a project with them?
In 2013.
2013, yes. Right. Because people had just got back from there when I had my first experience with them in Malawi in 2013. And I worked with a couple of people who had been on that trip. Do you mind if I ask you a little bit more about your finances and how you've gone about raising money? I mean, I saw on the one report from 2016, I think it is, that you had sort of maybe 700. I didn't count them all, but I sort of guesstimated about 700 individual supporters. You have some foundations, you have some corporate supporters, and it seems like the donations and the money is inflecting upwards now. You've also been really transparent with your finances. Is that something you could just talk about, your philosophy behind that and how that's going in general?
Currently, about 6 months ago, maybe it's been a year, I and several of our staff members put every single receipt that we'd ever done onto one spreadsheet, right? And added about 20 columns so that we could data sort to the information.
Yeah.
So that means that every single penny that we've ever spent is on one spreadsheet and can be shared with anybody. And so the kind of the big deal with that is it's not just the line item information. We attached the image of the receipt on column A to that spreadsheet. So now all of our books are entirely and completely irrefutable to the point that somebody could look at every single receipt if they wanted to from Google Drive.
Wow.
There's a certain confidence that brings. Now, after doing that, I thought it was going to be very exciting. Honestly, only like some of our inner group really cared that much about it. But it did inspire, I believe, some confidence in our organization, at least amongst us, that we know exactly how every single penny is being spent. And that gives you a certain confidence.
Yeah.
And that also comes out with the people that you're talking to that are investing in your project, that you can say that with confidence to them, and they can take a look at that. It's a different level of interaction with your support. And, people have been really generous. I've been amazed to what degree that people have absolutely no idea who we are, have only heard one or two things, and then given some very generous commitment or donation. And then, the reason that we have 700 people or so that actually donated, because we don't really rely at all on large donations. It doesn't really work that way very much with us. But a whole lot of people from all over the world continue to support what we're doing.
Oh, it's super exciting. It seems like the future in terms of being able to be free with what you do, but the accountability is key, especially in this day and age when you can publish it so easily.
Yeah.
Because one question I have, I'm eventually hoping to start some sort of educational project or maybe even community. But one thing that's always sort of not bugged me, but also always been a question with work. I've studied NGOs and done masters in that kind of stuff, and you look at people in the world doing good, and there's this sort of weird expectation that they should be doing it for free or doing it for very little money. So how have you balanced that sort of external culture of NGOs of not getting paid much with paying yourselves? How do you justify what you do? Do you feel like that you live the life that you deserve? How do you sort of think about that in general?
Well, that's a good question. Not even really an easy one to answer. It's kind of all over the place because I don't know. You start not necessarily thinking about how much money do I have and should I do this. You start off with a conviction. You're like, okay, what's going on in Guatemala is absolutely preposterous and absurd, and we're going to figure out now how to make something happen. And then along the way, I haven't had the money to rent a beach house, but because people in South Africa were so wonderful, we got to stay really in one of the most beautiful spaces I've ever seen, right there on the coast. And so, it's not always the most convenient where you don't just get to pick 2 weeks and then take a holiday or something like that. You kind of have to wait for those moments to come up whenever you're looking for a break or something like that. But, most of us sell everything that we have, and then all of a sudden you don't have a lot to take care of, and that's much easier. Or we cash everything in because pretty much all of us have been all in on this. We just you really can't think too logically about it, or you can't take into consideration all of the all the later consequences.
No, it's an interesting one because I think if you are living somewhere, if you're living somewhere eating well with good people in a beautiful place, what else do you need, sort of thing? That's priceless compared to living in a polluted area or with people you don't enjoy being with, etc., etc. But it does seem like a block for society. From one side, you got corporate social responsibility and doing things hopefully a little bit better and being more aware of the consequences of buying that cheap shirt from China or whatever it is. And on the other side, it feels like we still have to value what we do. We still have to really say, well, it's not just education we're providing dignity for other people, for other cultures. Like, we need our own dignity within our own societies to do the same thing. It's the same with teachers' salaries. Why do teachers' salaries, why are they so low compared to other jobs that don't produce anything? When teachers are taking care of, 100% of the future in a sense. So it's a question that I wrestle with, and I enjoy asking people and seeing what they say and getting their take on it.
To me, there's no conspiracy that all of our representatives don't have all of our best interests in mind. And a lot of this is based on, law. It's legislation that this is what we're going to pay the teachers, or, and as long as people from primary, middle, and high school are completely uninvolved in the democratic process, it will remain that way. There's nothing that would necessarily jump in and change it on the scale necessary to better represent the interests of those teachers. You asked just a minute ago, why isn't there better pay for this? It's public policy, and that's why we've shifted the education at our school, is because if a major change is going to be made in Guatemala, basically our students and other people involved in the community are going to have to understand the process and be in a position to make legitimate proposals. And, the green building process we've seen really puts people in that position. It's a really democratic process that requires a lot of input. And so you can change that culture. It's just, it's going to take a multi-generational approach.
Yeah, no, I hear you. I mean, I've watched the community. My daughter's school is a Steiner school here in Italy, and I've watched that grow from 12 students to now 100 students. And, installing or creating cultures and following through with first principles and adapting, all while surviving economically. I mean, you can be sustainable or regenerative if you like, but there is that economic element, and it's something that I feel we need to talk about more as a community that are trying to make a difference, just because we don't live in a gift economy yet. Even if we might want to move towards that, just in terms of scaling, we need to set up the springs to be able to scale in an effective way.
Yeah, I mean, what if rather than sending, thousands of troops, we sent thousands of development workers to a place that really needed our help? I think that would send an entirely different message, and we would probably go to war a whole lot less.
No, I hear you.
But once again, the people making those decisions don't necessarily have our best interests in mind all the time, and those are the kind of decisions that they make. And they will continue to make those decisions until we develop the educational process that puts people back in a space where they understand that those decisions require their participation.
Well, this is where I think you are quite a number of steps ahead of a lot of organizations. And the fact that you've got lots of different individual donors, and if people can be encouraged, it's a change of culture because we expect so much for free, but if people can be encouraged to say, hey, and it might happen with cryptocurrencies, which make it easier to do, but if people can make very many small payments, so much can happen. And I've noticed that when I've done projects, you do get $10 here and $20 there, and it really does make a difference. But a lot of people don't really have the habit of doing it, even if they could do it, or don't believe it will make a difference and therefore decide not to do it. It seems like that momentum's changing with your project, though. It's snowballing, and it's definitely growing quicker than it's melting. That seems self-evident.
Yeah, well, we've had the chance, we've survived the test of time to a degree.
Yeah.
At the beginning, we would have made some errors, and potentially not every dollar would have been spent as well as we can do right now. But I believe that, we're able to make our budgets available, and it's very easy to see exactly how we spend every dime. And that's because we've had time really to polish the model, to whittle it down, to turn it into something that's, a lot of what we're doing, when you get a bunch of people in one space, you're all kind of throwing ideas out there, and you're trying to capture them and then, take them on and see to what degree they work. And sometimes they do, and sometimes they don't, and then it costs money for it to not work sometimes. So we've gotten to this point now where we're pretty laser focused, and there just isn't a lot of space for us to waste money. We know what we would like to accomplish.
So given that you're 10, 15 years in, what is it that you want to accomplish, and how, let's say, how would the next 20 years look? What would be the ideal scenario? What would be the options for scalability?
So we're working in this village right now. Let me start a little further back. Yeah. We are very close to finishing our school campus. Now that means we've trained 25 local builders. We have a teaching core of 18 plus administration, and then we have 137 students. So because of the school, we created all these living condition improvement sustainability projects. We know how much they cost, we know the process by which they go up, and we know the difference they can make in people's lives immediately. So what we're going to do is take all those resources, teachers, students, and builders, and we're now working with the village of Chiquim Sanaí, which is about 7 or 8 kilometers outside of Guatemala. So right now, our students are going from house to house, and they're collecting all of the data. They're going to take that data, and they're going to see what this community actually needs. Now, this is the really fun and exciting part, still relating to the 20-year, what's coming in 20 years. Well, the curriculum that was developed, like say, students still go to social studies class. Well, now in our social studies class, rather than doing a super abstract survey where people quickly lose attention and have no real connection to it, they're doing their survey in Chiquim Sanaí to evaluate living conditions of, people very close to them for the purpose of sustainably developing the village. So that means our middle school is in the 7th grade going to be working on building stoves there. Our 8th grade is going to build tinacos, which are these water storage tanks. The 9th graders, latrines. The 10th graders are going to build water cisterns. The 11th graders, retaining walls, and the 12th graders are going to build a home. So this means now that this is a student-led project, that the future, the evolution of our product, the sustainable living condition improvement pieces, is basically in their hands. So not only will the students be able to go to the teachers and ask for advice, but they'll be able to go to the builders and see, where their research is actually going. And that's not even the exciting part. Like, that's just the education that the students will be receiving in a very real-time manner, bouncing between the classroom, learning geography or learning geometry, learning the social sciences, and then back out into the field. Now, what we expect the effect of this is when our students, and we're out there working in Chiquim Sanaí, is very, very likely that a politician will come out there and go, hey, I'd like to help. We're going to say, okay, great. Why don't you help? They're going to promise to give us something. It'll be gravel, sand, something like that. And then likely, as has happened in the past, they're not going to provide it. A year will pass, and then it will become another election year. And then other politicians also wanting to be elected will come out there and say, hey, we want to work with you guys. We're going to say, fantastic, pull up a chair. What would you like to do with us? They're going to sort of compete as to who can do the most with us. And we expect that if, one election, maybe 2 elections down the road, that it will be pretty well impossible for anybody to get elected if they're not doing the community projects that they have promised, at least at our level, right? We're going to be setting the standard in that town for what can be done with even non-governmental based money. Yeah. So the mayors or the elected officials are at least going to have to meet our standards. So we expect politics to change in that town. In a country the size of Guatemala, there's not too many steps from mayor to senator to governor and then to the president. We're really hoping that one of our students, through all of these activities and this kind of education, that, if not one, a whole bunch of them will be in a great position to start helping make some of the decisions there.
Wow. Sounds great.
Yeah.
That's the whole exciting thing about education, but it's such a long-term game.
We're being conservative with how long we think all of this is going to take. I think that the politicians in our town are going to appreciate what we're doing and are going to appreciate the opportunity to collaborate with us, where they may not have had as many opportunities in the past. And potentially without any conflict at all whatsoever, we can slip from, government corruption to some degree, rampant government corruption, to the order of the day is that people are doing everything as well as they possibly can.
Yeah. Wow. Well, listen, I mean, all I can say is it's inspiring to see what you guys are doing from afar. And At this point, I'd ask, what's the easiest way for people to contribute? Your site is longwayhome.org, isn't it?
Yes.
What other ways can people get in touch with you if they have anything to contribute or say or questions? Or
the best way to be involved these days, if you really want a crash course and really want to get involved in the sustainable development of Shaquem Sani, it's best to go to our website and join our Green Building Academy, because for 1 month, we're going to be building a sustainable home off the grid, earthquake resistant. We're talking full services, solar, septic, the entire thing. And of course, all of the money that we go spent on the Green Building Academy goes back into our programs. Yeah. So if you want to do more than volunteer and you want to have a 1 month adventure, you should come and participate in our Green Building Academy. There's, of course, you can also visit our website to volunteer, and it's really, really easy to donate.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Let's leave it at that. Well, listen, it's a pleasure to speak. Thank you for all of this information and definitely paving some sort of road. So it's so cool to, for once, speak to someone who's, 15 years in rather than just starting out or 2 years in. So, Matt, thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for what you're doing. I don't think anybody would much know about what we're doing if it wasn't for you. So thanks for taking your time and, giving us some visibility.
Oh, it's a pleasure. Well, I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. Before you go, or rather immediately after you've gone, please go down to iTunes, leave a review, help us grow, get more guests, raise more money for projects. We have other projects coming up. You can find news about those on offgrid.vision, where you can also get access to other shows and some phenomenal t-shirts which go towards, the profit of which goes towards new projects. If you have any requests for someone to come on the show, do let me know via the site. Until next time, thanks for listening and see you soon.